Hello and welcome to Owl Site, your channel where finance and technology meet to uncover the stories shaping our world. I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most fascinating and influential places on Earth, Silicon Valley. The birthplace of global innovation, the hub of world-changing technology, and the symbol of entrepreneurship, Silicon Valley has an extraordinary story. From humble orchards and farmlands in California, to becoming the beating heart of the digital age, this region has transformed not only itself, but the way billions of people live, work, and connect. Part 1, The Roots Before Silicon. To understand Silicon Valley, let's first go back to the early 20th century. The region we know today as Silicon Valley was once known as the Valley of Heart's Delight. It was filled with fruit orchards and agriculture. No skyscrapers. No tech giants. Just fertile land and a growing population in Northern California. The first seeds of transformation were planted at Stanford University, founded in 1885. Leland Stanford, a railroad tycoon, wanted the university to contribute to the public good. By the 1930s and 40s, Stanford professors and graduates were already tinkering with electronics and radio technology. It was Stanford's culture of research, engineering, and openness to industry collaboration that became the foundation for what was to come. During World War II, military research created demand for radar, electronics, and advanced communication systems. California's West Coast became a magnet for defense contracts. Scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs began to cluster around these opportunities. One man, in particular, would play a central role: Frederick Terman, a Stanford professor often called the father of Silicon Valley. Terman encouraged his students not just to study, but to start companies. He mentored two young engineers who would change everything, William Hewlett and David Packard. Part 2, Hewlett-Packard and the Birth of Tech Entrepreneurship. In 1939, Hewlett and Packard founded HP in a small Palo Alto garage. This garage is now famously called the birthplace of Silicon Valley. HP began by building audio oscillators but soon expanded into a broad range of electronic instruments. What made HP unique wasn't just the products, it was the culture. Hewlett and Packard pioneered what became known as the HP Way, a management philosophy built on innovation, respect for employees, and long-term vision. This entrepreneurial spirit began to spread. Other Stanford alumni and engineers followed the same path. Instead of just taking jobs, they built companies. The idea of startup culture was born here. Part 3, The Shockley Story and the Traitorous Eight. The 1950s brought a major turning point. William Shockley, co-inventor of the transistor and Nobel Prize winner, moved back to Palo Alto to start Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory. At first, it seemed like a huge win for the region. But Shockley was notoriously difficult to work with. Eventually, 8 of his top engineers left the company in 1957. They became known as the Traitorous Eight. These 8 brilliant minds went on to found Fairchild Semiconductor. Fairchild is arguably the true birthplace of Silicon Valley as we know it. It created a new business model, a venture-backed startup focused on semiconductor innovation. The company produced integrated circuits, which laid the groundwork for modern computing. Fairchild was also the mother company of the Valley. Over time, many of its engineers and executives left to start their own companies. This created what historians call the Fairchild diaspora. Out of it came iconic firms like Intel, AMD, and dozens of others. Part 4, The Rise of Intel and the Microprocessor Revolution. In 1968, 2 of the Traitorous Eight, Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore, co-founded Intel. Intel went on to revolutionize the world with the invention of the microprocessor in 1971. The microprocessor condensed the power of a computer onto a single chip. This was the breakthrough that made personal computing possible. Intel's chips powered the personal computer revolution of the 1970s and 80s, with companies like IBM and Apple building entire industries on top of them. Moore also gave us Moore's law, the observation that the number of transistors on a chip doubles roughly every 2 years. This principle became the driving force behind decades of exponential technological growth. Part 5, The Personal Computer and Apple's Story. Meanwhile, in the 1970s, another revolution was happening in Silicon Valley garages. Two young men, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, built the first Apple computer in 1976. Apple's vision was to make computers not just for corporations or labs, but for individuals. The Apple II became one of the first highly successful personal computers, paving the way for the PC industry. Later, with the Macintosh in 1984, Apple introduced the world to graphical user interfaces and a new philosophy of design-driven technology. Jobs' relentless focus on merging technology with human experience became a defining characteristic of Silicon Valley startups. Part 6, Venture Capital and the Startup Ecosystem. One of the hidden engines of Silicon Valley's success was venture capital. In the 1970s, firms like Sequoia Capital and Kleiner Perkins began investing in high-risk, high-reward startups. The availability of funding allowed entrepreneurs to dream bigger and move faster. Unlike traditional banks, VCs weren't afraid of failure. They knew that out of 10 startups, maybe one would succeed, but that one could change the world. This financial model nurtured companies like Apple, Cisco, Google, and later Facebook. It created a risk-taking culture that became Silicon Valley's defining trait. Part 7, The Internet and the dot-com boom. The 1990s brought the Internet to the mainstream, and with it, a new wave of Silicon Valley giants. Companies like Yahoo, Netscape, and eBay emerged, creating entirely new industries. Venture money flooded in. Startups popped up overnight with bold promises to revolutionize everything. By the late 1990s, the dot-com bubble inflated rapidly. Many companies had no real business model, yet raised millions. In 2000, the bubble burst, wiping out billions in value. But the collapse wasn't the end, it cleared the field for stronger companies to emerge. Amazon and Google, for example, survived and went on to dominate the 21st century. Part 8, The Age of Google, Facebook, and Mobile Technology. In 1998, two Stanford PhD students, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, founded Google. Their search engine revolutionized how information was organized and accessed. Over the years, Google expanded into advertising, cloud computing, Android, and more, becoming one of the most powerful companies in the world. Meanwhile, in 2004, Mark Zuckerberg launched Facebook from his Harvard dorm, but Silicon Valley became its true home. Social media platforms reshaped human communication and created new business empires built on data. The next great leap came in 2007 when Apple introduced the iPhone. The smartphone turned every individual into a constant consumer of digital services. This mobile-first revolution created entire industries, app development, gig economy platforms, ride-sharing, food delivery, and countless others. Part 9, The Modern Silicon Valley, AI, Cloud, and Beyond. Today, Silicon Valley is synonymous with innovation at scale. Giants like Apple, Google, Facebook, now Meta, Tesla, and Nvidia dominate not just American markets but global ones. The focus has shifted toward artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, clean energy, biotech, and the metaverse. Cloud computing, led by Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, has become the backbone of modern digital infrastructure. Breakthroughs like deep learning and generative models are reshaping industries from healthcare to finance. At the same time, Silicon Valley faces new challenges, questions about data privacy, monopoly power, income inequality, and the social consequences of technology. Yet, even with criticisms, it remains the epicenter of global innovation. Part 10: What makes Silicon Valley unique? Why did all this happen in one place? A few reasons stand out: the presence of Stanford and world-class universities, a culture that celebrates risk-taking and failure, the venture capital ecosystem that fuels bold ideas, a tradition of knowledge sharing and networking, and finally, a sense of mission-driven entrepreneurship. People here want to change the world. These elements created a self-reinforcing cycle that has lasted for decades. Conclusion: the legacy and future of Silicon Valley. So, from orchards to microchips, from garages to global empires, Silicon Valley's story is not just about technology, it's about people, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of progress. Its legacy is complex: innovation, disruption, wealth creation, but also inequality and ethical dilemmas. Yet no matter how you look at it, Silicon Valley has shaped the modern world more than any other single region in history. And its story is still being written. The next breakthroughs, whether in AI, quantum computing, or sustainable energy, may again be born right here in the Valley. Thank you for joining me today on Owl Sight. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of Silicon Valley and want to explore more stories at the intersection of finance and technology, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. This is Owl Sight, where we see beyond the surface. Until next time.